A mockery of justice. Saudi Arabia is criticised for reducing the sentences of those convicted of murdering Jamal Khashoggi. The case is now closed. So, will we ever find out the truth about the journalist's killing? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Imran Khan. Saudi Arabia is facing international criticism after closing the trial of those who murdered the journalist Jamal Khashoggi. A court overturned 5 death sentences, reducing them to 20-year prison terms instead. 3 others were jailed for between 7 and 10 years. Now, the court didn't name the people it convicted, but those behind the so-called hit squad escaped punishment, as did Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who is widely believed to have ordered the killing. Khashoggi's fiancée, the United Nations and rights groups have condemned the secret trial which began last December. We'll bring in our guests in a moment, but first, this report by Alexi O'Brien.
The Saudi hit squad accused of killing journalist Jamal Khashoggi was caught on camera landing in Turkey and entering the kingdom's consulate in Istanbul. That's where Khashoggi, a prominent and well-connected critic of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, was interrogated, killed and dismembered. But while 21 men were detained by Saudi Arabia over his murder and 11 went on trial, much of what happened in the courtroom remains a mystery.
The trial was done secret and closed trial. There was no international observers. The names of the victims or the accused were not published. And there's no more appeal possible. So, and the nature of the evidence, every technical part of the trial almost has been questioned by internationally accepted judicial standards.
Last year, 5 of them were given the death penalty for the killing, but that's been cut to 20 years in prison. 3 others have been given sentences of 7 to 10 years, in what Khashoggi's fiancée is calling a farce. 2 of Khashoggi's sons met the Saudi king and crown prince in the weeks after their father's killing. The CIA and other intelligence agencies have said there's a direct link between the crown prince and the murder. The case caused worldwide outrage and tarnished Mohammed bin Salman's reputation, with several of those in the hit squad coming from within his inner circle, though he denies involvement. The UN expert who investigated Khashoggi's murder said in a series of tweets, "The Saudi prosecutor performed one more act today in this parody of justice, but these verdicts carry no legal or moral legitimacy." She went on to say that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman remained well protected against any meaningful scrutiny in his country, and that the verdicts can't be allowed to whitewash what happened. The Saudi prosecutor says this closes the case, both privately and publicly. Many, though, say justice for Khashoggi has not been served. Alexi O'Brien for Inside Story.
Let's bring in our guests, all joining us from Washington, D.C. Ali Al-Ahmed, Director at the Institute for Gulf Affairs. Ali is a Saudi dissident and a former political prisoner. Sherif Mansour, Middle East and North Africa Coordinator for the Committee to Protect Journalists. And Khalil Jahshan, Executive Director of the Arab Center, Washington, D.C., and a former colleague and friend of Jamal Khashoggi. A warm welcome to you all. I'd like to begin with you, Khalil Jahshan. The Saudis say that justice has been served, the case is closed. Pretty much everybody else says, actually, no, it hasn't been served at all, including the United Nations. Has justice been served?
Absolutely not. This is not justice by any stretch of the imagination, and the case is not closed for the most logical reasons. Number one, after proceedings that lasted more than a year and a half, we still do not know who ordered the killing. In terms of the verdicts, it covers only 8 out of 15 from the team that engaged in the assassination in Istanbul. And it seems to me that this verdict, the more you look at it, with all due respect to the prosecutor's office in Riyadh, it seems to me it's more politics, it's more PR than it is justice and accountability. So in my humble judgment, the case is not closed at all.
Ali Al-Ahmed, the proceedings were held in secret. We don't know who has been convicted. We don't know the names of the people who have been convicted. We still don't even know where Jamal Khashoggi's body might be. Has there been any justice here?
Well, this is why I never call Saudi courts the justice system. The Saudi court system is part of the security apparatus in Saudi Arabia. And although international standards for the courts and for justice requires transparency in terms of such cases, especially that involves murder, you're absolutely right. We don't know who are the accused. We don't know of the proceedings. I have followed, I have, and I have documents of other cases where people were executed for protesting, for example, and you can get the proceedings. Their family at least can get them. In this case, we don't know. The proceedings. We don't know what the judge told these defendants and what the Saudi prosecutor's office raised. Khalil is absolutely right. The issue here, none of these trials have said anything about who actually ordered or conceived of the idea of killing Khashoggi. And this is just a kangaroo court that is aimed at closing this case and moving forward. This is not limited to this case. The Saudi court system is and has been for decades a place where the state controls the people, and if you, for example, protest, you can die. But if you murder people, you can walk. You walk with no problem, and it happened many times to members of the ruling family, for example, who shot people in the middle of the street.
That's actually a very interesting point, Ali Al-Ahmed. That's actually a very interesting point in that this case was about people who were very close to the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Khalil, Jahshan, how much of a bearing do you think that the fact these were confidants of the Crown Prince had on the Saudis wanting to get this done quickly and close it quickly?
I think there were two factors for the speed with which this has been done, at least this last phase of legal considerations in Saudi Arabia. One is definitely the proximity of those involved to the Crown Prince. The fact of the matter that all the key figures in the group of 15 that carried out this mission were closely affiliated or associated with the Crown Prince, some office directly or some other foundations affiliated with him. Second, I think, is the issue, and we need to kind of focus on that a bit more. Yet the media hasn't really fully focused on it, is the pressure from the United States. I think this verdict, in a way, is an attempt to appease the pressure from the people affiliated with Mr. Trump, particularly Kushner, in advising, if you will, and urging the Crown Prince to proceed in this direction, to close this case, because it's becoming a hindrance to further cooperation between Riyadh and Washington, particularly the PR issues it has created in Washington for the Saudis, particularly in Congress.
Sherif Mansour, I just want to come to you very quickly. You're the Middle East and North Africa coordinator for the Committee to Protect Journalists. Here was an opportunity for Saudi Arabia to really do something to show that it was serious about protecting journalists, it was serious about journalism within the country. It clearly didn't do that. Saudi Arabia is too big to criticize. It's got away with this, surely.
Well, they think they did, and that's why they keep invoking the word final verdict on this, whatever that happened in court. And it's in no one's doubting that the fact are they never thought justice. They just thought of how to shut this down with the least consequences, specifically for Mohammed bin Salman and his top aides. We think this is all a matter of testing public opinion, trying to find a way to cover this up without much more questions asked. Even fundamental questions about where Jamal's body is, about who is the mastermind. They didn't even try and add any credibility by showing the names of the people involved. We don't know who the 8 people is. We only know of 20-some people, names that has been circulated in even the Turkish court and in international reports by UN investigators and other sanction system. I think this is where people are actually waiting for justice, which is international justice. Sanctions directed specifically at MBS, at his top cronies, anyone who was involved in planning and not just executing, guiding people who did this, even people who tried to cover this up, not just in Saudi, in the United States. And that's what we at CPJ are trying to make sure, that everything becomes public. You can keep secrets in Saudi, but you cannot keep secrets worldwide. And you cannot keep US and international institution from doing their job just because you have an international funding donor forum later this year.
But Sherif, you might not be able to slow the US down. It may well get to a point where names have been named, justice has been served internationally. That might happen, but it won't happen as long as Mohammed bin Salman and Jared Kushner and the US President Donald Trump are all have the same goal, which is just wiping this under the carpet and moving on and getting on with the election in November. How do you suggest that the international community speed things up?
So because of this case, actually, the outcry that resulted from it have pressured institutions and government worldwide. And we saw for the first time actions directed at stopping military aid, stopping intelligence training, intelligence collaboration, and in some ways withdrawing support from MBS, who years ago thought he will descend to the crown without a problem. So we think there is still chance at creating a political consequence for bin Salman. And part of that consequence doesn't just stop at Khashoggi case. It also goes beyond the individual case to the broader freedom issues, including the treatment of other journalists in custody. We have more than 20 journalists in custody in Saudi. More are being arrested. We need the government to recognize that they have a role to make up for what happened, not just by serving justice in this case, by broadening their reforms to actually become meaningful so that the international community can continue to have a relationship with the government of Saudi, because this is a government extrajudicial murder. It's not just one individual case.
Ali Al-Ahmed, do you think Sherif Mansour is being just a little bit too optimistic in thinking that things will get to a point where justice will be served?
Look, the Trump administration, and I have to disagree with my friend Khalil here, is they are not pressuring the Saudis. They are working together. You can take conspiring, really, is to make this go away before the elections as soon as possible. You know, you have the G20 meetings. They don't want that, negative coverage to haunt them. So it was the U.S. is supporting the Saudi, or the Trump administration at least, is supporting the Saudi government in terms of trying to cover this up and to make this go away. The idea that there is an international effort to hold justice for Jamal Khashoggi or for others, I don't think that's realistic. It hasn't happened before for greater issues and problems, not only in Saudi Arabia, but for what we call the pro-Western camps or countries where murders have been committed and they got away with it. If you look at Iraq, even you have hundreds of people who have been killed, and it's not happening. So really, I don't think there is something. The justice, if it will be served, it will be from within the country if there is a political shift in that country. But otherwise, internationally, I think relying on so-called international efforts is futile, and it doesn't happen. It hasn't happened to the Palestinians or other people in the region, especially.
Khalil, Jahshan, it's been described, the US-Saudi relationship has been described as one of a blind eye and turning a blind eye. The US has given Saudi Arabia, let's say, leeway, a lot of leeway when it comes to operating internally. Is this just another manifestation of that blind eye policy, that they're just not interested?
Exactly. I think this has been the case from day one. I would remind you of the first comment by the president when this happened. It was kind of total denial and that we've been in touch with our friends in Riyadh and they deny all this. And then the president had to kind of tone down, if you will, this self kind of defense by Saudi Arabia, and to kind of mimic the arguments made by the Crown Prince and others in this regard. And the Saudis even were a bit more responsive than the Trump administration in admitting the fact. But once they admitted, it embarrassed the administration. Yet it didn't do much to really confront Saudi Arabia in this regard. I think Ali misunderstood when I said pressure. Pressure is, I didn't say pressure in the negative sense, or in the kind of aggressive sense where the president of the United States is pushing this case. On the contrary, he just wants it out of the way. So yes, he is a co-conspirator in the attempt to close this file, because it has become a nuisance for him, as I said, particularly in relationship with the legislative branch to pass issues and deals that he would like to proceed with in terms of the relationship. But the relationship has always been out of whack between Riyadh and Washington.
Sherif Mansour, this isn't 1990 anymore. It's 2020, and one of the biggest tools you have at your disposal is social media, is the internet, is talking to dissidents within Saudi Arabia who are able to get you information out when it comes to these things. Can you put enough pressure on the Saudi Arabian government through social media, through the things that we've just talked about, to get answers? Or is it still an all-controlling state?
Well, thankfully, I'm not just being optimistic here. I'm just also recognizing how vast the interest of Saudi and the influence of Saudi worldwide is. And that comes with a price. They do care about what people think about them, and they do care about inviting celebrities from all over the world to come. This reform agenda that the MBS is trying to enforce over the course of the next 10 years is all about being open and collaborative and modernizing the society. And that cannot happen while this case continues to be the biggest elephant in the room. There is no room big enough where international visitors can meet with their Saudi counterparts and think the Saudi issue is not going to be on the table. It will be, for as much as MBS is in power, as much as he is the de facto ruler in Saudi, and it will continue to haunt any effort of international collaboration, investment, tourism that this government is trying to do in order to appease to the international community.
Al-Ahmed, it's interesting, isn't it? You have a Saudi Arabia that wants to be open, that wants to encourage tourism, that wants to be a global player. Yet domestically, you have a Saudi Arabia that seems to be going backwards, arresting dissidents, murdering people in consulates, and behaving generally like it is a state from the 1950s communist era.
And this has been basically the recipe that Washington has supported in the region. I recall some conversations I had with people in the State Department who run the Saudi affairs, and they basically said the same thing, that we want to modernize the country, but politically it has to be very repressive. We want them to learn math, but we want them also to be very extreme in their views. That's talking about the population. We support the king. Nothing. I recall this conversation when I reviewed decades of American statements on Saudi Arabia. The word people was never mentioned in those statements. So after I made a fuss, they started using the word people. That is the model that the U.S. strategically has used for the region and in the Arab countries, Arab majority countries, is that we deal with dictators. The people do not matter, and that this model continues until today. It is about how can we get our interest from these rulers, absolute rulers. What you saw, for example, in Egypt is one, it's an example of what the U.S. wants to see in the region. Loyal allies who would deliver anything the U.S. wants or what the UK wants, and then the rest does not matter. Torture, killing, whatever, it doesn't matter. The type of government, it doesn't matter. What matters is how can we get our interest through with the bases, the arms sales.
We are running out of time. We are running out of time, Ali Al-Ahmed, and I want to come to our other guests as well. Khalil, Jahshan, Al-Jabri's case is going through the US courts at the moment. It's getting a lot of play within US foreign policy circles. This is a man who is claiming that the Crown Prince sent a team to Canada to kill him. Is that a court case that you think will be a turning point in Saudi-US relations?
Not yet. It depends. If the case is really pursued legally in court, it might. Thus far, I think it has been an embarrassment, definitely, and a nuisance in the bilateral relationship between the two. But should the courts take it seriously and pursue it, which I doubt, I have a feeling that this case is essentially a PR case by those concerned, in the sense that Al-Jabri is essentially trying to pressure the Saudi government publicly to leave him and his family alone. If that is achieved before the court proceeds, then that might be the end of that case. But also the case has so much national security implications. Past precedent in this country shows that courts tend to avoid these cases per advice from the White House and the State Department. So I'm not optimistic that the case is going to really see the day of light and normal judicial procedure in this country.
Sherif Mansour, do you think, both our guests in Washington, D.C. also have talked about the American influence and the American influence on Saudi Arabia having an impact not just on this court case, but on relations generally. Do you believe that the Americans are a big factor here?
They've always been, the relationship between the U.S. administration and Saudi have always been close, and even President Trump have said publicly in front of his supporters that the Crown Prince relies on the U.S. for protection, his personal protection, the king as well. And that gives a lot of pressure ability and also a lot of leverage to use. And I'm not putting down much of what everyone have said about lack of pressure from and close relationship that this administration has. I'm just saying that it's not just the U.S. President that matters, and that's why we're going to U.S. federal courts to pressure the administration to reveal the things that they are stopping Congress and others from saying publicly, and to make it easier to identify MBS publicly as the responsible person for this.
I want to thank all our guests, Ali Al-Ahmed, Sherif Mansour and Khalil Jahshan. And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on Twitter. We are at AJ Inside Story. From me, Imran Khan, and the entire team here in Doha, bye for now. Bye.